Next thing you know, Quentin's coming up to me saying, "Hey, Sheldon, how you doing, man?" And so we're talking. And oh, by the way, Quentin, this is my friend Jean-Claude Van Damme. Hey, Jean-Claude, how you doing?
Hey guys, do you think it'd be a good idea for Van Damme to be in a Quentin Tarantino movie? Like, comment below if you think that's a great idea or just not so much. But anyway, that was a discussion, or at least a talk, with Sheldon Lettich, Quentin Tarantino, and Van Damme. Sheldon's going to share that story, by the way. Like, was that ever a possibility? Is it a possibility in the future? But speaking of Sheldon, make sure to get his new book, From Vietnam to Van Damme, where he talks about obviously the movies he was involved with, Bloodsport, Double Impact, Lionheart, Only the Strong, and so much more, like his relationship with Sam Raimi and Quentin Tarantino back in the day, and then, which we're also going to discuss in this video. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please help support the channel, hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, buy the book, linked in the description below. Who ended up writing Kickboxer, though? Because you didn't get writing credit on that, right?
No, I actually, I wrote a treatment. I still have the treatment here, but I didn't. I'm not one of these credit hogs where I have to have my name on absolutely everything that I ever touched, because I actually wrote the first draft of Army of Darkness.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I said that in the book.
No, it's not in the book.
I mentioned working with Sam Raimi and those guys. But yeah, I actually wrote very first draft of Evil Dead. They hired me. I've got the contract. I've got the script. Okay, so I did that. And I actually worked on a film that ended up being called Crime Wave, which was originally called the XYZ Murders. I did a rewrite of that, written by Sam and his brother. I did a rewrite. They hired me to do a rewrite. I did the rewrite. I don't think they liked my rewrite that much. And then they ended up hiring Joel and Ethan Cohen to do another rewrite. And that's the one that they went with.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I never pressed I had a contract for all of these things. I never made a big issue about wanting credit. Even if I worked on it, even if I contributed ideas, I got enough credits. Okay, I don't have to make a big deal about any of this stuff.
Wasn't there another film that you co-wrote with another guy? Thou shalt not kill something.
Oh yeah. Oh,
and it ended up being something that Quentin Tarantino kind of remade, right?
Once upon a time in Hollywood. I think I mentioned it in the book.
Yeah,
I co-wrote it with Josh Becker, who was an old friend of Sam Raimi and Rob Tapert, Bruce Campbell. Actually, Josh has made a number of small movies with Bruce Campbell. Bruce is sort of his Van Damme, I suppose. Because
yeah, sure. That's funny.
Together. We co-wrote that. And our original title was Bloodbath. And when you see Quentin's movie, you realize, like, hey, that wouldn't have been a bad title for this, because it does turn into a bloodbath at the end. So I wrote a draft, which was like ridiculously long, like 180 pages. And Josh said, I'm gonna cut this thing down with my buddy Scott Spiegel. So Scott and Josh rewrote it. And then they shot it in 16 millimeter with Bruce Campbell playing the lead. And it was called Strikers War at first. Then they remade it and shot it in 16 millimeter. Well, I think Sam Raimi played Charlie Manson in both versions. In the 16, yeah, and the Super 8 version. Yeah, that's Sam Raimi at the end playing. Wow. He's got blood all over his hands. And he says to one of the characters, "You'll like this. It's going to be fun." I think he ad-libbed that line. So anyways, they ended up making a 16 millimeter version that they called, it was still called Strikers War. And Bruce by this time, had joined the Screen Actors Guild. And this is a non-Screen Actors Guild movie. And Josh did not want to join SAG. So Bruce could not star in the second version of it. So they got another guy to star in it, made this movie, and their distributor, they had a distributor named Irving Shapiro, who'd been doing this for decades. And Irvin is the one who bought Evil Dead, who took the Evil Dead, which was originally titled Book of the Dead. Okay. Irving said, okay, I'll distribute this movie for you guys, but I'm changing the title because people don't read books. So you can't call it Book of the Dead. It sounds boring. And he came up with the title Evil Dead, which to me it sounded like a ridiculous title at the time. But anyways, Irving came up with that. And that's a long story about Evil Dead. But basically, Irving also took on Stryker's War, but he said that's got to have a better title. And so he came up with Thou Shalt Not Kill Except, which nobody really seemed to like at first, but then they realized, okay, Irvin knows what he's talking about. And he ended up selling that and getting it shown in theaters. And Josh Becker talks about this a lot. He's got a little blog that he writes. I can say that ended up being a bit of a template for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, just because of the Manson family and the big shootout at the end, the big massacre at the end. And when I first met Quentin, he was working at Imperial Entertainment selling titles. They had a number of VHS titles. Mm-hmm. And so he was working in the office and basically doing a desk job. And comes up to me and he says, "Whoa, you're Sheldon Lettich. You co-wrote Thou Shalt Not Kill Except." He loved this movie. I was just gushing about it. Yeah, so there's a little bit of a through line there because he loved Thou Shalt Not Kill Except, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really does have pieces of that in it. Yeah, sure. They're basically living next door to the Mansons, and that was the same setup in Stryker's War. Mm-hmm. Thou Shalt Not Kill Except. That it was a couple of Marines that had just come back from Vietnam were living next door to the Manson family, and ended up wiping them all out at the end. So you could say, I'm sure Quentin would probably even admit it. Say, yeah, that was a bit of an influence on me.
Has there ever been like a talk with you and Quentin maybe working together on something, or even Quentin and Van Damme or anything? Has that ever like come into the conversation? Because you guys were all part of that same circle where you even introduced producer Lawrence Bender to him, for example.
To those guys. Yeah. Well, actually, there was a Arnold Schwarzenegger used to have these monthly soirees at his restaurant. He had this restaurant called Shotzi in Venice, and they would have cigar night once a month. And so Jean-Claude and I get invited to cigar night at Shotzi, and Quentin's there. Oh. And Jean-Claude said, "Hey, look, there's Quentin Tarantino." Next thing you know, Quentin's coming up to me saying, "Hey, Sheldon, how you doing, man?" And so we're talking. And by the way, Quentin, this is my friend Jean-Claude Van Damme. "Hey, Jean-Claude, how you doing?" He's always bubbly and enthusiastic. Yeah, sure. Like that. And Arnold came over also, so we're talking with Arnold. This is really a pretty high-level Hollywood soiree. Then Jean-Claude says to Quentin a bit later on, after we've been schmoozing for a while, "Hey, Quentin, you and me, we should make a movie together, huh?" Mm-hmm. And Quentin just kind of nods. And, "Yeah, sure, Jean-Claude." And then as soon as Jean-Claude walked away, Quentin and I look at one another. And I said, "Crimson Tide Part 2." And Quentin got a big laugh out of that. And then we were coming up with other titles in French that he could do with Jean-Claude. So he did not really want to work with Jean-Claude. I didn't ask him why. We never got into it. But Jean-Claude was just not a Quentin Tarantino type of an actor, I suppose.
A tragedy.
Interesting.
Quentin liked his movies, but didn't wanted to work with the likes of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and
sure
some of these others.
Yeah, that could have been interesting though. But so there was a story there though. You guys all did meet up together.
No,
and a conversation, though it turned into jokes, did occur.
No, we were all hanging out, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was there too, coming up. Arnold was coming by. "Hey guys, have a cigar." We're all smoking cigars. It was cigar night at Shotzi. I think Arnold stopped doing those after a while, but he would do them once a month, and I went to a few of those things actually,
Wow.
and met some very high level people there. Like,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
yeah, Jerry Bruckheimer, some pretty big stars would come to that event.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of like get-togethers, people have talked about your like amazing parties you threw, right? Can you give us a little insight into that whole thing? Because apparently you had like a lot of these Hollywood guys, and you would throw these big parties at your house, and
but not for really major Hollywood guys. It was mostly mostly like B movie guys. Okay,
that's still
but,
cool.
At the time, Quentin was a B movie guy. Okay,
Yeah, sure.
so Quentin's been to my house. A lot of these people had. Chad Stahelski and David Leitch came here one time. This is before they started doing all this stuff. That's when Daniel Bernhardt introduced me to Chad. I come over to, so we got other people here too. I look in the bathroom. I got a bathroom over here. It's got some Van Damme posters in it. Not being insulting to him. Jean-Claude always was taken aback by that. Hey, how come you got my posters in the bathroom? I got no other wall space, Jean-Claude. Okay, my wife doesn't want you staring at her every single day. So plenty of wall space in there. So anyways, I see here's Chad and David and a couple of their other friends staring at the wall, not saying anything. Like, we're saying stuff like, wow, they're staring at a Bloodsport poster. It was like a religious icon to the Bloodsport poster. And I've heard that those guys want to do a remake of, they want to do only this, they want to do Bloodsport, like Chad and David would like to do a new version of Bloodsport and would like to do a new version of Enter the Dragon. So that would be cool, huh?
That could be interesting. I mean, does Alberto Lenzi know that they want to basically do a reboot of Bloodsport? Because I know he's still trying to get his made. I've actually talked to him.
What's that? You've talked to him?
Yeah, I got his number.
Okay. And what did he say?
Well, a couple things. And I'll tell you some really exciting stuff, by the way, which this is just between us.